excited about our very first faculty symposium. This is really awesome. This idea was born out of the thought that we have a huge opportunity to create some type of teaching and learning academy of sorts. Because we have such a wealth of knowledge among our faculty here at Northwest, and that's campus-wide, why not learn from each other? My experience, oh yeah, Keith, make this about you. Since I have the floor. When I was a student here back in the 1900s, my first semester I had an instructor by the name of John Mitchell. Many of you have heard of John Mitchell. I knew before I got here that teaching was a passion of mine and I wanted to teach. He became my teaching mentor. Didn't know that was going to happen, but to this day I still use some of his teaching methods and his teaching techniques and his humor that he would inject into his classes that would make learning fun. Years went by, I finally acquired the credentials to be able to teach. I had the awesome opportunity to come back to Northwest and teach with these folks. And my teaching education continued because I was learning more from other faculty members at Northwest. Mrs. Shaw, Mr. Aaron, Mrs. Rutledge, Mrs. Harris, Dr. Pagels, and the list goes on and on and on. And as you know, we've got hundreds of years of teaching experience here at Northwest, and that's just between Dr. Pagels and Mr. Aaron. Please tell him I said that. So I think it's a great idea to take advantage of this, right? We don't have to hire some consulting firm and all these fancy folks to come and tell us what we already know, what to do. And we already know how to do it. We just need to share amongst each other. And so that is the purpose of this event. And we plan to have many more. We plan to put this symposium on a schedule so that we're learning on a consistent basis. I would like to thank Dr. Heindel for being here. Did not know he was going to be here, so this is kind of a surprise, but that's what I love about our new leader, is that he is involved and he is concerned and cares about what we do at Northwest. And we don't always have that in leaders in higher education. We all know this, and so thank you very much. Would you like to have a word?
No, I don't. It's rare, but I don't want to say anything. I just want to absorb, and I'm excited to be here.
Thank you very much for being here. I would like to introduce to you Mrs. Candace Walker. Mrs. Walker is our director for the Student Development Center, and she's also going to serve as our moderator for our symposium today. Thank you very much. So I'll turn it over to you, Mrs.
Okay,
Walker.
sure. So welcome everyone. I would just like first to start by introducing our panelists, which all of you I feel sure already know, but we'll go through introducing them anyway. First we have Mr. Rick Stevens. He is the program director for our cardiovascular technology program here at DeSoto Center. And next we have Ms. Amy Shaw. She is the coordinator of humanities instruction here at DeSoto Center. Next we have Ms. Wendy Davis. She is the coordinator of mathematics instruction here at DeSoto Center. Ms. Rebecca Allen, psychology instructor, and then Mr. Dan Shearer, computer science instructor. So I will just start by introducing our first question to the panel, and we're hoping that this will lead to a lot of great discussion and interaction. So feel free to ask questions and bring up any thoughts and ideas that you might have as well. Okay, so our first question to our panelists is, what does it mean to engage a student, and what does that look like in the classroom?
I'll start. Okay. To me, it means active learning in the classroom, not just copying down what you write on the board. They are actually learning in the classroom. If students don't feel like they're learning in the classroom, if they feel like, I could have read this in the book, no, why would you want to go to class? What I like to do is I'll do some examples, and then I'll say, here's one. You try it on your own. I give them a couple minutes to try it on their own, and then we do it together. So they're actually learning in class, not just writing things down.
For me, I want to make sure that they want to be there. As a recovering K-12 teacher, I can tell you, state-tested K-12 teacher at that, I can tell you that when your students don't want to be there, they are not going to take anything that you have to offer and use it for themselves. First, they have to know, number one, why should you want to be here? What do I have to offer you? And also then that I actually care about you learning, kind of, with you giving that time to try it on their own and do that, that shows that you care, that they understand and that they learn. And I think that's one of the really important personal connections we can make. It's important to try to learn all their names. I know with 150 a semester that, sometimes it's quite a challenge, but learn as many as you can and, have conversations with them before and after class, just to get to know a little bit about them. So that they feel like they can come to you when they do have a problem, when they do have a concern, or they just have a random question they don't know who to ask. That they can come to you, and that's going to make that connection.
I teach computer classes, and so I'm in a lab all the time. Every student has a computer in front of them. And mine, even though it's on the academic side of the house, it's probably more tech-oriented because they're learning the applications, they're learning the Windows operating system. And so my classes, the students are very busy every day. They're busy doing something. They're actually hands-on working with the computer. And I can quickly tell when a student isn't engaged when I look, and they're not as studious. They're not working they're not concentrating as much. And I have very little lecture in my class. I introduce a new concept, and because everybody works at their own speed and they know Word, they know Excel for different levels, I don't try to hold them back by making them follow me along on the screen. But then I wander around and I can find those students that clearly aren't engaged. Then I'll talk to them and I'll try to figure out, well, why is it? And what kind of problem are they having? And then I try to help them individually. So in my classes, there's a lot of individual, one-on-one almost, the way my classes run, rather than a large lecture.
For me, it's much of the same, what she said and she said and he said. And
You can't copy her.
I think y'all copy, hey, I know you copy mine. But anyway, I think what we're saying is possibly I have establishing a rapport with the students. And it looks informal. How does it look? It looks, did you ask that already? Or were you waiting to ask that next?
We haven't gotten there, but go for it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead.
No, go for it.
Anyway, it looks informal a lot of times, like before and after class for me. Also through emails. I have said in the past, I'm not going to start this semester answering every email. Miss Shaw, I forgot when I was supposed to read. Miss Shaw, my alarm didn't go off yesterday. And every semester I slowly slip back into it, or pretty quickly really, slip back into doing that. And it, like, if somebody's kid's sick, I think that you give them a little heads up more than what's on Canvas, and you start to, I start to establish rapport in the humanities when you're asking them to write papers. There's some of that because it's a very individual process.
I'm in a little different situation from all of you. I don't have 150 students. I don't have to keep up with 100 different essays every 3 or 4 weeks. I'm spoiled. I don't have to decide, does this student want to be here? My students have to do a separate application for my program, for a tech program. So they're at Northwest. I don't get the students that are at Northwest because Mama said I have to go to college so I can stay on the insurance. I get the ones that want to be here, and thank goodness we have the option to interview our students before they come in. So we're able to identify the students that really want to be in our program And the ones that are probably not a good fit and know they're not a good fit, we can help them find where they need to be. Whether it's the healthcare assistant program or computer science. We've had some that just, they were in healthcare because mama said that she was a nurse and your grandmother was a nurse, so you need to be a nurse too. That doesn't work. But I get to know my students a lot better than most of these do. And I couldn't do this by myself. Cindy Stanford is back there. We have been working together since November the 8th and 9th of 2006. Her first day as a Northwest employee, she interviewed me. I'll tell you that story someday, but it was rough there that first couple of years. But as far as engaging students, I have a head start because I know a little about them, and we know that they want to be there. So I have that luxury. But as far as in keeping them engaged, small classes, I love it. And we do a lot of informal communication, like you said. The first day of class, we set up a group, actually 2 group meet groups, if you're familiar with that app. It's a great way to communicate with larger numbers of people. We have one group meet that for the students, and that includes me and Cindy. We have another group meet that includes students. I don't need to know all of their chatter, but it's a good way to keep them involved and let them know that we are listening and we do pay attention to what they have to say.
So I just wanted to touch on one more thing, since we are talking about engagement and you all mentioned rapport building. If someone would like to elaborate just a little bit more on how best ways to build rapport with your students.
Listen. You listen to your students. I read, David Niven has an excellent autobiography. David Niven is a Hollywood actor, one of my favorites. It's in 2 volumes. The first is The Moon's a Balloon, and the second is Bring on the Empty Horses. Fantastic books. But in that he describes an incident where he met Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin was his acting idol. And he got to ask the question, what advice would you have for a young actor who's still learning his craft? And Charlie Chaplin replied, listen. Don't just wait for an opening so that you can say your line. Actually listen to what the other person has to say. That tells you more about how you need to respond. And even though that was directed towards stage acting, I think it really makes a huge difference in interactions with students. Listen to what they have to say and let them finish their statement. And because that way I know how to respond, and it lets them know that they are valuable. That's probably the hardest thing we have to do with some of our students, is to convince them that they are important and that they can learn. And I'm going to shut up.
Well, I think the nonverbal cues too, I think goes right along with that. Get out from behind the desk and be approachable. Be someone that they feel like they can come up to and say anything to, ask you anything. And be prepared to be asked anything. You don't have to answer it all. Right. You can choose not to answer, or you can choose to rephrase the question for them before you answer, or whatever. But being approachable, and that can be with that smile, greeting them at the door when they first come in that first couple of days, or getting out from behind the desk and wandering around the room. Just going by and you see somebody that looks like they're a little off that day, just putting your hand on their desk or on their shoulder if you feel comfortable doing that can make all the difference in the world in their day. And later on you might find out that that was the thing that helped them get through the day, or let them know that somebody actually cared about them, even if you didn't say a word.
I know, first off, what you said about names, I think that's super important, because if they know that you noticed they weren't here that day, then they're like, oh, Miss Davis pays attention when I'm not here. And I try to in the very beginning, when we're about to have our first test, I tell them, I mean, just basic little things about how to be successful on the test. You need to write out all your steps, you know, don't skip steps, stuff like that. And I let them know, you know, I care that I'm here for you to succeed. And so I want to give you just these little things. And if they know that you care about their success, you know, they might work a little harder. A couple other little things, knowing their names, say hello to them in the hall. Tell them, yesterday one of my favorite students, I've had him, you know, this is the second semester, he was all dressed up. I assumed he had a speech or he had to go somewhere. I was like, Parker, you look really nice, you know. Just let them know you notice, you know who they are. Speak to them in the hall. I also, sometimes I'll share little stories that kind of go with what we're teaching. I did an example in class that actually my daughter texted me on how to split up their utility bill because 2 girls lived there for, you know, 20 days and the other 2 girls lived there 30 days. So I actually did that in class one day. Why? Because when am I ever going to use this in math? And so I tell them, you know, this is a true story. This is my daughter and these are her 2 friends. Or I did probability. My kids were both born. This would only happen to a math teacher, right? My kids were both born at 7:08 p.m. on a Monday. So I showed them, you know, what's the probability of that? And so I think if you share a little bit about yourself, they know you're a person and you can relate to them. Like, that would only happen to a stats teacher. Right? It's 1 out of 10,040.
I do something similar. I have 3 grown boys that have all gone through college. I'm the first one in my family of 9 kids to go through college. And, but all 3 of my sons went through school and 2 of them struggled. And I share that with my class all the time. I tell them that, you know, my second son was the president of his senior class. And he went off to Oregon State University. And after 2 semesters, they told him not to come back. You know, and I share that so that they know that they're not the only ones that are struggling, that have a hard time. And then I go on to tell them, though, that he came back, he went to a community college. I stress that because that's what he did. He got his associate, he got his bachelor's, he's got his MBA, and he and his wife now are doing phenomenal, but he struggled the first few years. And I think that makes us real people to our students when they hear these kind of stories, and I have plenty of them to share along that line, more than I want to. But I think that's important. I think it helps them understand that. And then Ricky, you were talking about the luxury you have that everybody wants in your course, and I think most of us that teach. We're teaching courses that they have to take. These are, whether they want to or not, they have to take these courses. My computer concept class is a perfect example. Everybody has to take a computer. And most of my students come in thinking they know everything. They grew up with computers. Well, and they look at me and whatever, and they don't realize that I remember when the first calculator came. I went, my freshman year in college when I was taking calc, I was using a slide rule in 1969. We got calculators. But these students think that they are the be-all and end-all with computers, and in reality, they're not. They're very good with some aspects of technology. So they don't want to be, there's nothing I can learn here in this class. So I try to make them understand that, and make them, and it kind of rolls into question 2, but you know, what am I going to get out of this? What am I going to get out of this? You know, so every time I'm teaching, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Windows 10, whether it's Microsoft Word, Excel, or PowerPoint, I try to emphasize how it's going to help them either in their personal life or as they continue on through college. And I try to put that value into it so that they feel that, okay, well, I guess this isn't a waste of time. Maybe I'll get something positive out of this. Because whether we like it or not, most of their motivation is to get a good grade. I mean, that's the reality. And they want to get a good grade. I want them to learn the material. And I think if I do my job right, I can get what I want and they can get what they want if I do my job right. So, but we have to figure out how to make them want to be here. whereas Ricky, yours are, they want to be there.
I like what Rebecca and Wendy said about knowing their name. No, we don't know what their home life is once they come in, what they go to, but I think most of us are in education to try to make a difference and help somebody. I had a student one time who was very shy, sat on the back row, aced every one of my tests, was smart, I mean, didn't say a word, but very, very smart. And we were in pre-registration, and I'd come up to get something to drink out of the vending machines, and I saw him, and I was just calling Johnny. And I said, hey, Johnny, how you doing? He's like, real shy. And I said, look, I just saw that you signed up for my Psych 2 class. I'm looking forward to having you in class to hear your viewpoints on things. And he just kind of shrugged. He said, yes, sir. And so I didn't think anything about it. So on the day of the final exam, he was taking the exam, which he already had an A, but Northwest has a policy. But he was sitting there, and I thought, is he sick? Something's wrong. So he finally waited till everybody left and came and turned in my test. And very, very scared, very shy. No, not much eye contact. And he turned in and he said, Ms. Aaron, can I tell you something? I said, sure, tell me what it was. And he said, remember last October when you saw me and you were getting a Sprite and you said, you called me by name and you were interested in having me in Psych 2? He said, that morning, I told my parents I'm going back to school. He said, because I just didn't feel like I was contributing or getting anything out of it. And he said, you called me by my name. And he said, I went home that night and told my parents at the dinner table, I changed my mind. Mr. Aaron knew who I was, and he's looking forward to what I had to say. I mean, I'm getting chills just saying that. That to me is what education is about. And he did come back and he did graduate from Northwest, and he aced everything in Psych 2 also. But I just think for some of us that are getting older, it's hard to remember names. And when you have 150, it became difficult. But I think that personal touch is what Northwest is so good at.
And it's so good that we now are able to access the
photos.
photos.
Amen.
Yes.
So we can study for our own
Exactly.
quiz of taking roll. I consider taking roll a quiz. I want to see how many I can do on my own. I'm almost at 100%, but I mean, that's part of our brand, smaller classes
Personal attention, personal.
versus a 300 auditorium hotel.
Now, I do tell mine to cut me some slack. If you're not in the most recent 300 names I've had, I will remember your face, where you sat, and what you took, but you're gonna have to help me with the name.
Because you have to purge
Right, that's
every semester.
The flip side of that is I can't tell you the number of times where a student will come and they'll complain to me about another teacher. Well, I'm just not doing, well, what's your teacher's name?
They don't
And I look at, and this is what I tell them everyone, and when I say, are you kidding me? I do that. Are you kidding me? We're trying to memorize hundreds of names. You can't remember 5 people? You should all know your teachers. And I bust their chops over that, and I give them a hard time.
I had one come up to my office one day, was looking for his teacher, and speech teacher, it was probably Sam Wheatland, but didn't know Sam's name. I said, I'm trying to find my teacher's office. I said, okay, well, what's your teacher's name? Pulled out their schedule. This is like 6 weeks into this is like October. Pulled out this printed schedule and goes, Mr. Staff. So, yeah, they don't necessarily.
My first test in every one of my classes is a multiple choice question. What's your teacher's name? And it's
I use
on
the substitute teacher. Have any of y'all seen that?
every one of them. Yeah.
I'm often referred to as the little lady with the pantsuit and the pin.
Yeah, describing to us. Yes, for sure, all of you.
Yes.
So I think what we're hearing mostly when we're talking about engagement, it seems to me, from what I'm hearing from you guys anyway, is that personal rapport, the care is what plays into really engaging the student. Because if they know you care, then they're more likely to engage with you. Is that right? So does anyone from the audience, any other comments or questions or remarks on engaging a student or building rapport?
I have one question.
Okay.
I heard your method of communication. I heard someone wanted to say something about grouping.
Yeah, that's true.
Do y'all use anything else for the other app?
I don't.
Isn't there a Remind app? Remind?
We use Remind. I didn't know if there was something that the college had as a standard or something, but
I like using the little Canvas deal where you can say, message all students who.
Haven't
Rather
responded.
they have to
Haven't
submit, or they have a
Yeah.
certain grade, or that it's late, and you can send a message out like
Or
that.
if you're a
to-
speed grader, you know, message the
Yeah,
ones who
it's about-
haven't submitted the
Right.
assignment.
Yeah.
And
That-
to add
those
on
are
that,
different
you tell your
features.
students to put the Canvas app on their phone and not just go through the
Right.
website, because like your bookshelf, you can't access it unless you're in the app. And also the students can set their notifications in Canvas so that it'll come like as a text message or however, and they can actually choose what they want to be notified about. So, because sometimes like, you know, when you're in a discussion board and you're commenting a lot, sometimes the students start to ignore because they're getting so much communication. And so it's always important to tell them, hey, you can, you know, filter what you want to hear from your instructor.
I tell mine on the first day, grades, inbox, and I use
Announcements.
grades, inbox, and announcements.
What I do
Announcements.
too is I've been teaching online for many, many years, and so I use Canvas extensively in my face-to-face classes. And I have my Canvas class broken down into weekly modules. And then what I do then is, and this kind of rolls in with your emails you were talking about. At the end of every class period, I have in Canvas, in class Wednesday, we did this, this, and this. The assignment for Friday is this, this, and this. And I do that for two reasons, and I make sure the class understands that. And that, one, they don't have to send me an email, because, and I tell them right up front, if you send me an email and say, Mr. Scheer, I missed class Wednesday, what do we do? My answer's what, I'm telling you right now, I have a cut and paste. It's going to come back to you. Please read the class notes from the Canvas. And if a student misses a class, if they're ill or they have to go to court or whatever, they all know they can log in there and they can see what was the, you know, and I tell them that I've had students that were sick for a week, 10 days, who never fell behind in their homework assignments, and because of that. So I use the Canvas, that part of Canvas to communicate daily with the students, and they know to go in there and read that information. And I find that very helpful.
Okay, so I guess we'll move on to our second question, which is, how do you make your class worth attending?
Well, I kind of started on that, and I'll just talk for a little
Sure.
bit. When we study Windows 10, the operating system, I share with stories with students where a student has spent a lot of time working on his or her English paper, her speech paper, saved it, and then can't find it. They don't know where they saved it to. It went somewhere on that computer, and they don't know where. So I make them create a folder file management system so that they have a place to put everything. So I covered that, so hopefully that makes it worthwhile too. When we get into Microsoft Word, we just finished up the chapter dealing with MLA papers. And I've worked with Amy, and I want to make sure, and I want to teach the classes how Word can be, look, it's going to help you do your English paper. It's going to help you.
And I appreciate Mr. Shearer because he is very receptive to every time there's a new handbook. I immediately go and give him a desk copy because
And I sent
it helps us, you know, also.
And I said, review this, let me know what is an MLA 8 right now, you know, because Word is MLA 7 for what it's worth. But I talked about that, and then Excel. You know, one of the exercises in Excel is a loan calculator. And I share a story with how I had used that loan calculator to purchase our last 4 automobiles. And I tell them a good story about how it works. And then I show them, and I share a story where one of my sons, he bought a bunch of appliances, 0 interest rate, right? As long as you make the payments. So I have them put this up, and they see that they paid $3,000. I said, well, guess what? He missed an interest. He missed a payment. He missed it. And the fine print said 29% interest kicked in. So I have them throw 29, and they see that those appliances now cost almost twice as much. You know, so I try to do that with Excel. PowerPoint, when we cover that, you know, most students have to do some type of a presentation at some point in college. And then I tell them that one of my sons, when he was in the Army, he had to put together PowerPoint presentations for the commanding general like every week. That was his job. And I said, so I try to make them understand that these things we're studying have something, have real value rather than just getting an A in the class. So that's how I do that.
Making your lessons applicable.
Yes,
to
yes,
real
give them
life.
some real life understanding of why it's worth them putting their effort in.
I try to do the same thing, especially in math. They say, how do I ever use algebra? I show them, I try to do like as, you know, it goes with what we're doing. Like when we solve linear inequalities, I show them how you could find out if you take a $100 bill shopping and you don't have a debit card and you don't have a credit card, how to figure out what you can buy before tax and not go over your $100 bill that you have. Just little things. I'll show them how, I'm such a math nerd. I estimate what my utilities are gonna be by going out and reading my meter. And it's using algebra. Hey, I get paid once a month, so, you know.
Good about
It's
this
good.
colleague,
Yes.
it's good about her.
Just
I'm English,
little
I
things.
don't do that.
I'm taking accounting online because I am a nerd, Northwest for the free class. Taking advantage of that, and I found something, a very simple little thing in accounting that was solving an equation, and I showed them, here, look, this is an equation, this applies to accounting. So I think it's really important to show them how this can be used, not just let me, you know, plug this out for a test to get a grade and pass.
I think with math and English, it's a little more of a challenge to show relevancy than it is maybe with computer or, because they've already, it's the core courses they, you know, cut their teeth on in education, and I know that many of you do the same thing. I see my English people back there do the same thing, I'm sure. I try to, we've talked about it in our own division meetings, we try to make our courses relevant, and I could tell you, I've been teaching a long time, and I don't relate to my students the same way that I used to. When I've shared this with Dr. Reed and others, and some have walked in my classroom and saw it and almost fainted, but because I had it up. But in literature classes, you know, it's statistically people who learn empathy are better citizens. They are better able to interact with people in the workplace. Therefore, they're able to hold down a job better. Their skills have a better chance of being enhanced by input from others who are willing to help them hone their skills. And literature does that for them. And the empathy that's learned by sharing a rich study of literature can make a huge difference in people's lives. And it's like Mr. Aaron was talking about with a lot of students are shy, or they'd rather, you know, just go to a dentist office. You know what I'm talking about. Everybody is playing with their phones. There's no interaction among people as much as there used to be in normal everyday situations. So literature, it bridges that gap, but I don't go in and tell them all that loftiness, or it's, my goodness, I got to get out of this crazy woman's class. So I'll present material in different ways, like for T.S. Eliot and Brit Lit, too. They may walk into the classroom now, and I changed in my traditional class, I changed my front page on Canvas according to whatever material we're covering. And so with T.S. Eliot, my favorite quote is from the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, and it's a salute to the day-to-day. You got your heroes, you got your adrenaline junkies, you know, we gotta have them. But then you gotta have the people who can do the day-to-day. And a salute to that is that my favorite quote, I think, it's the way I interpret it. You may not, it's fine if you don't. But there's a tattoo on a forearm in images that I found just Googling. And it says, I have measured out my life in coffee spoons. And we talk about, and my students come in, they go, Miss Shaw, are you getting a tattoo? I said, I don't know, I'm on the fence about it. Oh man, you talk about engaged and relevance, instant relevance. And you know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, tattoos in my class, not in the conversation probably, not so much. But my students are different now. So engaging them involves engaging them where they are, not just ability-wise, but interests, and a lot of times that opens the door for what they really need to be doing, which is also leads me to trying to let them know what their class is going to do for them later, how it's going to help them in their college career, how it's going to help them in the world beyond that. Writing papers, Comp 1, Comp 2, that's easy. You're going to have to write a paper, I don't care what you take. Go ask anybody up and down the hall. I'm on the Ole Miss end, we call it, where the Ole Miss classes are. I'll say, just ask anybody up and down this hall. You're going to have to be able to do this. I'm sorry, we got to do it. And usually that's pretty effective after I've got the rapport. I can't do that on the front end. But then after the rapport, but then, you know, over into the lit classes, I get people who start saying, my students, I get remarks like, Miss Shaw, you believe what I saw on Billboard? I thought of our class. You know, that's got to be where that came from. And I'm like, I'm sure it was. I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't taken lit. And I'm like, see, tell you. And so I have a whole little cult following of people who are trying to notice, you know, relevance in their world and understanding and empathy. So I think that all bleeds back, that goes back and forth between question 1 and question 2, but it's hard to make them sometimes see or allow them to see how it's easier when, you know, life skills, real life skills, than it is with necessarily literature. You have to approach it a different way.
We throw in, Cindy and I both throw in a lot of clinical situations when we teach. I mean, we're going to do hospital applications. We'll throw in some other stories as far as effective communication, communicating with your instructor. I had a student who sent me a text about 10 minutes into the first semester, you know, the Christmas exam, saying that she was running late, and she finally showed up for class, and she gives a story about how she got in her car and started to the road. She saw a deer, so she stopped the car, she shot the deer, she tracked the deer, she lost the deer, had to go back to the house because she had mud all over her boots and her skirt, and then showed up for the final exam, took the final exam, did very well, left, went home, and about 2 hours after she left class, she sent a text. It was a picture of her holding the deer. And I use that as an example of how to communicate and maintain that trust. I knew this girl, but she let me know I'm going to be late, and I'm going to be late. She followed up, she came to class, and then she sent evidence of why she was late. And that's the kind of things we'll throw in. And look, we've discussed everybody from Gene Autry, who they've never heard of, to, look, I said something about, I told one kid that he looked like Vince Gill with his new haircut, and nobody in the class knew who Vince Gill was, which kind of really hurt my feelings. But we
Ken Burns right now.
Ken Burns, right, that's what I just said.
But we try very hard to bring in any kind of real world examples, not necessarily hospital, not necessarily healthcare, but real world. By the way, I require my sophomores to do a presentation once a month, and they have to provide references, and all references are in something resembling MLA format. That's not my fault. I don't care if it's perfect. I don't care if it's perfect. I don't care if it's a colon or a period. As long, but I want something.
I'll get you a discount.
I'm not going to use it. Look, I prefer Chicago names. Okay, but yeah, something that resembles MLA format. So your efforts are not completely in vain, David.
Something I think is really important to be able to do all this, to make things relevant. Kind of goes back to something you started saying, and I'm a little bit of a math nerd myself. You're not the only one that looks at meters. So, and all that kind of thing. But not only am I a math nerd, I'm like a total nerd. Like all out, always have been, no chance of recovery. So, but what that means is I'm also totally a lifelong learner. I am always looking for the next thing I want to know, the next new thing. Yep, I'm the nerd taking classes too. And not because I need them for something in particular, just because I feel like it. But what happens is, I'm able to incorporate those into my class. And when I'm talking to, and sometimes I do some mentor teaching, especially with the folks at the high school, one of the things that they have trouble with is they're not always teaching a subject that they love. And if you don't love your subject, you are not going to be able to get it across. You've got to be that math nerd. You've got to be that psych nerd. You've got to be that English nerd. You've got to be that. And the way to do that is if you're teaching a subject that you're just like, oh my God, like at one point with general psychology, I got to the point where if I had to teach about that daggum dog one more time, I was going to go insane. But what I did instead was I just started looking for different ways to do it. I started looking for different information on this, some strange random application of this idea, so that I could love it again, so that I could be interested in it again. Because if I'm interested and I'm excited, then the whole empathy thing, they're not going to be able to help themselves. They're going to have to get excited too, because they just can't sit there and there's just so long they can sit there like this. When you are bouncing around and just acting like a fool, trying to get this across. And I think that's really important. It's not just how you plan, but that you really do love what you do. And if you don't, find a way to love it.
Any other comments or questions?
One little thing that I found about being a student, it really helps you see, remind you, because it's been X number of years since I've been out, don't solve for X. So seeing it from the other side and seeing how, oh, this is kind of unclear to me as a student, so maybe I should make sure that I'm clear as a teacher in that.
You know what I do is I'll find a, for lack of a better term, a mature student in my class, and they're typically a non-traditional student.
Yes.
And then I'll identify them early in the term, and then I'll take them aside, and I will ask them, you need to watch what I'm saying, what I'm doing, and you need to tell me if it's not clear, whether it's verbal or something I've written in my class notes or something. If you don't understand it, that true freshman's not going to understand it. And I have used that technique many times, and I've had these come up and say, hey, Mr. Sheriff, I wanted to talk to you. You know, what you were talking about there, it was confusing. And I go, oh, okay, and I have found that technique really helpful to me. It's just something like that.
We've got to be open to them sharing their perspective to us, like how we're coming across to them. Because really, unless you film yourself, which, okay, we got a camera there, you really don't know. One of the things I did as a high school teacher was, they would let us film ourselves, and then I would look at it and I'd think, oh dear, I've got to change that. But it really did make a difference.
It might sound so clear in my head,
It does.
and it is clear in my
Yes,
head,
and
but
when it
that
comes
doesn't
out,
mean
it's
it's
just
not in
so
theirs.
not.
And if it's not in theirs, it's my problem, is the way I look at it.
And also, I bet it reassures and builds confidence in that non-traditional student.
Oh, yeah.
Because you probably have this, I know y'all do too, the same relationship with the non-traditional student that I do. A lot of times they'll say, okay, now Miss Shaw, it's been a long time since I've been in class and I'm not very good with the computer. And so they need some confidence, and I'm thinking, you're gonna be my favorite student. You have no idea how I appreciate you. But, my response is usually, oh, wish I had a quarter for every time I've heard that. Not to worry, you're about to get a lot more experience with the computer and everything else, not to worry. Step by step, we're all in it together, don't worry. So I think that's a good approach. I like hearing that idea. I'm going to have to borrow it. I'll credit you, not plagiarize.
Okay, so we'll move on to our next question, which is, how do you balance academic rigor and relevance to ensure student success?
Okay, well, I'll jump off on that one. So one of the things that I do when I'm planning a course, and I'm an obsessive planner, and I spend a lot of time thinking these things through, and then I get in the classroom and all crap breaks loose and, forget it, and I end up changing. But the thing is, you've got your stuff that you have to cover. The things that are going to be on the test, or going to be on the entry exam, or going to be on, whatever thing it is they have to do. And you know that they have to understand those. So you want to make sure that you're always covering those topics in some way. But what I try to do is not just say, okay, you need to know this, and here's the right answer to this question, but instead turn it around and engage it and say, okay, this is why this idea is important, not just for the test, but for your life. So let's kind of take this idea and turn it around. And sometimes I'll just say, what questions do you have for me about this topic? In human development, I mean, that's easy, you know. And you've got to understand this. How can I help you understand this? Or, you know, here are some examples I have of this. What examples do you have of this? And that keeps that connection going, keeps it relevant to their life. They can ask a question that is like, and I frequently get, oh, you know what, now that you say that, that reminds me of a time when. And then they'll ask a question of, you know, had I done it this way, or had I used this process, could it have turned out differently, better, worse, whatever. So by not using that curriculum as, I've got to always do it this way, but instead using it as the launching pad of where you're going. You know, I've got to include this, but this is just going to kick me off to where I'm going. It's really important, which also means go beyond your textbook on it. Textbook is great. They have it. They can read, we think. We assume. Will they is probably the bigger question, not can they. But, you know, when you start pulling out the outside things, it may inspire them to go back to the textbook again and look at that. Okay, now that I see this relevance, I'm going to go back and get that a little bit better and understand it a little bit better. So.
I break down assignments into step-by-step activities, especially Comp 2 when it's the research paper. Assign as many collaborative assignments as I can so that they can gain confidence and get affirmation from colleagues or students. Like slipped there, Freudian slip. I did the same thing from my colleagues, get reaffirmation, borrow stuff from them all the time. They get, you know, I don't mind if they share ideas, I just don't want them to copy each other. And it's generally not a problem when we break it down step by step. I have very little of that, amazingly enough. And I mean, they can even write about the same material, they've got a different take on it. And another thing is guided peer editing. I won't just say peer editing, or they get, oh, good job. So I tell them that's not helpful. We have a checklist that they must fill out, and I attempt to sell it by saying, you know, what could be better? The person who will be grading your paper has made out this checklist. So this is what I actually look for. Let's let's run through it. Worst problem is getting them to complete the rough draft to start with so they can peer edit and go over the checklist with it. So, and then of course there's the Writing Center, shout out to Mr. Green back there, and that we have not had before except through Ole Miss. And Janine was wonderful, Miss Roush, and now we have our own Northwest Writing Center, and it's even better than it used to be. And the students are, I get him to come to class, and he has a really young, cool factor going on that I don't possess as much of anymore. And it's a new face works wonders a lot of times with the same material. So, and it makes them want to go to the Writing Center. So that's how I balance sort of academic rigor you can't get around, and Comp 2 is skills and it is theory. So it's a bit of a challenge to teach, and then we've got to do it in that one semester. And the relevance part, like I said, is easier. In the lit classes, I'll take a little informal survey of what they've read before, how many English majors or education majors who want to concentrate in English, what they've read. So I sort of get an idea, get them talking, and then I'll have an icebreaker exercise, like a journal entry on the first assignment. They'll collaborate with a friend, and they'll introduce the friend will introduce them, and then they'll explain what their friend wrote in the journal, and the friend will explain what they wrote in their journal, so that they're not just looking at their own material. And they've also got a friend and kind of break out of our, I don't know anybody in this class thing. And that's going on. And then I try to vary the selections as well as what I do every day in class. We don't always come in and do a journal entry. We don't always come in and do a reading quiz. We don't always come in and listen to lecture. I lecture a lot less than I used to. People won't listen to lecture anymore. It's not what they do. And so I found that I appreciate that too, because I'm not unlike Mark Anthony. I do not love, my ear does not love at the sound of my own voice that much. So I enjoy allowing YouTube and a lot of other, TED Talks, like many of you do, I'm sure, help you teach your class. I love it when I get somebody to help me teach my class, so, and my students love it. So anyway, it gets them talking, so I try to include as much variety as possible.
This is a hard question for me because in our field, since it's so focused, it's difficult for me to separate academic rigor and relevance because everything that we do is relevant to their later clinical practice. But back what you were talking about, sharing the journal entries and discussing it, I stole an idea. I didn't borrow, I didn't clarify, I stole this idea from Rebecca Allen. It's kind of the speed date thing.
Oh, yeah.
Just put them in a circle and said, you've got 1 minute and 20 seconds to have a conversation with the person in front of you, and then you rotate. And did that the first day of class, and it really did break the ice. But no, I have no shame. I will steal from anybody if I see an idea that I think will work. And we come up with something. But yeah, that's my take on rigor relevance.
My courses being so much more technical, it's really easy to see if the student knows how to insert a citation, knows how to create a DeSoto function. They can either do it or they can't do it. And when I talk to my students, I tell them that, and I'm right up front with them. I say, my goal is for you to learn the material. How am I going to know you learn the material? Well, you're going to be able to answer the questions on the test. You'll be able to do it. And my tests aren't. They're primarily working in the application environment. And so they either know how to do it or they don't know how to do it. And I tell them that, my goal is not to be, I'm not going to trick you. I'm not going to have tricky questions. They're going to be very straightforward. And if you've done the homework, it's fine. And I stress this with them over and over again. I said, my goal is for you to learn. The only way you're going to learn is if you do the homework assignments. If you don't do the homework assignments, you're not going to learn. And if you, and it's going to be a double whammy on you then if you don't learn. You're going to get a bad grade on that assignment, maybe a 0 because you haven't done it. And guess what happens? When you take the test, you're not going to do very well. You haven't learned the material. So do your homework assignments, and you will see a direct result of that. You're going to get a good grade. That's all they care. I'm going to see a direct result because they're going to get a good grade. They're going to get a good grade because they learned the material. And so I stress that with them at the very beginning. And I tell them, I said, I don't grade on a curve. And if every student in here gets an A, they're all going to get an A. And I said, if every student gets a D, you're all going to get a D. I'm telling you right now, you're going to get what you earned. And don't ask me about extra credit or anything like that. But mine is an introductory computer class. Everybody ought to get an A. It's not a hard class. It's just not. And I tell them that. I said, all of you sitting out there, you ought to be able to get an A. Certainly at least a B. And if you're not, look in a mirror, that's why you're not getting it. And that's what I tell them. I said it's, and then right about now, we're getting ready to have our second test. And I, whoever's idea this was, I'm all for it. We should be using Canvas. We should have way more than just our grade book and our syllabus in here. And I've been saying from the beginning that we should have a grade book, and I'll have a student come to me. This was several years ago. They would come to me and say, Mr. Scheer, I'm really worried about such and such a course. And I said, well, what's your grade? I don't know. I'm not sure. And I said, when I was a student, I hated that. It just chapped me. That I didn't know, I wasn't getting my assignments back, and when I was in college, And I said, you have a right as a student. And I was probably a rabble rouser then, but I've been here 8 years, and I've been doing this since day one. And I say, you have a right to know your grade. You need to very politely, very courteously go to your teacher and ask them about it. And they owe you that. They owe you that. And but I try to keep my testing and everything very, that they either know it or they don't. So it's real easy to balance academic rigor and relevance. It's pretty easy.
Similar thing for me, when I'm doing my test, and I prepare them from the jump. This is how my tests are gonna be. It's not gonna be rote recognition. If you're gonna make your flashcards and just flip through them until you recognize them, you're gonna be sad on test day. Because it's just not gonna work out. And so, but I give them guidelines on, okay, here's an outline of all the stuff you need to know. Now here's what you need to know about it. You need to know what it is. You need to know why it's important. You need to know what does it look like, where have I seen this, how can I use this. And if you can do all of those things, then you might pass my test and be happy on test day. Because I use a lot of scenario stuff, but I think that kind of forces them out of that rote memorization bit that we usually associate with rigor and puts it into that I actually know how to use it in my life. And you know, your examples with the map, perfect for that.
I know in math, academic rigor, if you're teaching beginning algebra and you're teaching intermediate algebra, you know what your beginning algebra students need to know before day one in intermediate algebra. So the rigor is sort of already there in math because it builds. If you know what they're going to do next, you know they need to know this, 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 and this. And I probably sound like a 3-year-old in my class because I say, why? Why not? Can we add these? No. Why not? Okay. And so I think if they understand why they're doing what they're doing in math instead of, this is the rule, I do this, okay? Memorizing some rules is gonna last long enough for that to come out on the test, and that does not work in math, because if you don't know your times tables, you can't divide, just like everything else in math.
Any questions or comments? Michelle, when you use TED Talks, do you ever have a problem getting the students to engage in it afterwards? Like, do you do discussion about it, or what do you do along with the TED Talks or the YouTube videos?
Usually we've had an assignment leading up to it. I use them in Comp 2 more than I do Lit. Lit's more, YouTube and clips from movies have been made from the literature or whatever. How about their take on that, blah, blah, what do you think? It's easier. In Comp 2, there are all kinds of TED Talks out there about how to do that perfect white paper, or how to do, and I use that for relevance as well. And why do we need that? Why do we have to have a white paper on everything? Well, we got to know what the standard is, we have to first know the standard on something before we can improve on it or see if it's indeed worthy of being called the standard in whatever discipline you're going into. So what I'll do is when I do the APA paper last, the third paper we do in Comp 2, the assignment is to tell what your major is. Okay, now we're going to find 2 scholarly articles about some issue within that major. And so then I group the majors together as much as I can in class. They collaborate on some issues they think are pertinent in their field. Then I'll search for the TED Talks. And then they have to make a list of the problems or whatever they think. Why is this an issue? They have to tell that. What makes this an issue? And that's their favorite word, issue. So I just have stopped trying to battle it. I just incorporate it. And because they get that, they know what that is. And then I find TED Talks in those areas. And then there's no problem with those groups of getting them to interact. But if I just go in there cold turkey with the TED Talk, it's like, well, I wish I brought my popcorn and drink, entertainment, and I'll get my phone out and play with it and do whatever, and, But if they are already engaged with the material, and I do that in something they're interested in, because it's not gonna come if they're not interested. It's not as effective. I've just started doing that, and I stole the idea from, I didn't originate it, I will go ahead and not plagiarize, from Janine Roush, from teaching advanced comp, the 250, advanced comp for Ole Miss. And I did observe her class, she did observe my class, and I stole that biggie from her.
So I use a lot of them in my child's psych too, and a guided discussion sometimes help. The power of silence is great, because they will only sit there silent for so long before somebody breaks out and comes up with something to say. Or if they're really stuck on it, I'll divide them into smaller groups and say, okay, here's a topic I want you to discuss, you discuss, you discuss, you discuss, and then y'all are gonna each, take turns telling me what you think, if I can break through it. But usually, like since we've let in, usually it just sort of goes, but when it doesn't, there are ways to make it happen.
Well, I'll also kind of build them up a little bit and say, now I know since you found your 2 articles that we're about to do the annotated bibliography, for, incorporate that into your annotated bibliography. I know that you're kind of an expert on this issue or in this area. So see what you think about this or that. And then the other people like to hear the TED Talks on the other topics. And there won't usually be but about 4 or 5, 6 divisions in a class of 20. 5 max usually. So that by the time they get to that last paper too, they're real sick of literary papers and, all those rules of citation, and they embrace it.
Well, I have one more question, because sometimes I always I want to add a little clip in some of my classes, but then I always fear they're going to oh my gosh, I'm just watching a video, I could have stayed home for this, sometimes I feel like that.
You have to definitely
Or, in the discussions after, getting them to talk. Some of my classes will talk and we'll have the best, but how do you do that in your literature? Because sometimes ours kind of overlap each other.
Journal entries,
From the video clips, and y'all do a journal entry off of them?
Burton.
Not
How you get yours
specifically for
started.
video clips, but yeah, it can be. It's just a way of kind of directing their thoughts, and, it becomes the foundation for class
Channeling.
discussion often. Yeah, but not specifically from video clips, but I don't see why that wouldn't work. I can give you some examples of specific things that I have them address in the journal entries if you would like.
Yeah, I would.
Okay, sure.
A lot of times my journal entries don't necessarily have to deal with the plot or
Yeah.
it's a concept or a topic, we studied this little short story called A&P. It's about a 19-year-old boy by John Updike. Little boy working in the grocery store, 19 years old, the A&P, I tell him, okay, we don't have A&Ps around here, it's the Kroger of yesteryear, all right, on the East Coast mostly. So, and we read the story and he quits because he's wanting to impress these 3 girls. So my journal entry will be, do you feel he did the right thing, yes or no? Have you ever quit a job? Do you feel you were justified? Why did you quit? Were your parents supportive or no? And you quit your job. And then the other one they can choose from is, have you ever witnessed anything that was not right? Somebody, and later you wished you had said something, or did you witness something and you did say something? Are you glad you did, or was the price too high? And so they will write, they never ask how many sentences they have to have on that one. They will burn it up. And a lot, I have had to start reminding them that other people might be reading their journal entries. Sometimes we read each other's because they'll write things that'll break your heart.
Yeah.
That might embarrass them if it was shared with another class member. They don't mind sharing it with their instructor at all.
Okay, so we'll move along to our 4th question, which is a little bit controversial. What are some methods for managing outside distractions like cell phones, other technology, or just outside distractions in general?
I think Mr. Aaron should answer that.
Okay, can I tell a story? We changed to Pepsi, and so I have to buy my Dr. Pepper from up here now, so I go to buy my Dr. Pepper and my Reese's cup today. And the young man working, I can't remember his name because I've had to purge his name and replace their names. Miss Davis, how are your classes going? Oh, they're going good. How are you doing? And I would have used his name if I could have remembered it, but he said, have you kicked anybody out yet? I was like, no, I haven't. He was like, well, I got kicked out of Mr. Aaron's class. I said, well, what did you do? He's like, my dad was blowing up my phone. I was like, okay, have a good day.
I'm gonna take this one, because I'm probably not in agreement with most of the people in this room. First day of class, I have every student, I say, okay, who owns a cell phone? Hold it up. Okay, now, turn it to silent and put it on your desk. Okay, you'll leave it there for the rest of the semester. And what I do, I say, when you start getting texts and calls during class, I want you to reply with, I am in class, I will call you later, and put the phone back there. And yet, after the first week or so, I don't have a problem. And I also tell them, if you get a text or a call that you have to take, because we have students that have small children. We've had several that had sick grandparents that were in the ICU that they really wanted to be at the hospital with them, and they wanted to be in touch. Just the idea that the phone was there, that they could do that, was good. It kept them in class. But if you get a phone call or a text that you have to deal with, I want you to do just like Dr. Heindel did a while ago. He picked up his phone, he walked out of the room, he dealt with it, and came back. I say, don't tell me you have to take a call, don't say I'll be right back, don't say anything else. Just go deal with it like an adult. And I really don't have a problem with that. After, like I said, after about the second week, they don't get text and they don't get calls.
And the difference between the tech and I've got 35 students in my class right now.
And not the same 35 all day.
Yeah, and so
But
that
there's a
comes in play.
difference.
However, I did try one semester. My Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 11, I had everybody take out the phone and turn it upside down and put it on the left corner of the desk so I could see it, you know. And they loved it. I mean, the students in my comments on my evaluation said, I like what he did with the phone students, that you still do that? And I'm like, well, no. And I'm not as mean as everybody thinks I am with cell phone, because I've never denied a student. All they have to do is tell me before class. They don't even have to tell me why. They say, Mr. Aaron, yes, I've never done. But if I'm lecturing and people are interested in asking questions and that phone goes off, I've lost all my students. And then now I don't lose them because it's new. They want to see what I'm going to do. And I just point to the door and say, out. And I keep going, because I think it's rude and disrespectful. And I use this example. Some of y'all might think this is morbid, but it's the truth. My dad was dying with a terminal illness. I never once took my phone to class. If my mom calls and tells me my dad died, what the hell can I do? Nothing. So I knew that Miss Burns or Mr. Lawson would come down and knock, or Amy or David, if that's, I mean, my mom raised 4 kids without cell phones. She did a damn good job, if I must say myself. But these are important and they're part of life, but you sign up for the class, so you should tell all your people from 11 to 12, I'm taking a psychology class, don't bother me. And if it is an emergency, or if grandma or grandpa had a heart attack, what can you do? Well, my grandmother's having her appendix taken out, okay? Well, so are you taking it out, or you just want to sit up there with your, you know? I mean, you got to teach them a lot of this, because some workplaces won't let you do that. Right? And so psychology to me is life skills. I went to a prominent preacher's funeral in Memphis, and they put on the board, and somebody's phone went off, and they put it back up on the screen. It did it again, and I'm shaking, and I'm with Elizabeth Hilliard Burns, most of y'all know her, and she said, it's going to be okay. And I said, God's not going to call you by the cell phone if he's going to get your attention, right? And she said, why are you getting so, because I think it's rude, and I think it's disrespectful. My dad, I did his eulogy, and I said from the beginning, some of y'all were there, I said, my Northwest people are laughing, but if your phone goes off while I'm talking about my deceased father, I will stop, embarrass you, and ask you to leave. Somebody's phone did go off. It was toward the end. And I said, just tell me who it is after the funeral. And that person came up and said, Charlie, I'm so sorry. I was like, what? She said, it was my phone, and her husband said, I saw her put her hand in the purse, and I guess she turned it on instead of turning it off. And I said, that's why I love you, because you told me, don't worry about it, right? So it's different, but I've never denied anybody, and my students will tell you that. But if I'm texting and it plays, what's that new song by Billy Ray Cyrus?
Old Town Road.
Yeah, that was somebody's ringtone the first week, and I said, giddy on up and get out.
Well, I have a quick little comment that I want to make, just because this is something that I experienced recently. I was at a high school football homecoming recently, and, you know, they read out a little snippet about each person that's on the homecoming court, and, you know, what their hobbies are, and what they're interested in, and I'm not lying, one girl, one of her hobbies was being on her phone. So, that was a shock to me, that that's a hobby now, but it is.
It's an addiction.
That's
Well,
what it is.
it's
We're talking
an-
about meeting, like, it's everywhere, we all have our phones, so just how you handle the fact that they're going to have their phone, and being on the phone is a hobby now, apparently, and so how you deal with that, yeah, in your classroom.
And I asked my students, how many of y'all think you're addicted to your phone? And someone raised their hand. I said, those of you did, and you're lying.
Right.
You know,
Because they
I mean,
are.
I have mine with me because I'm a diabetic, and it raises my blood sugar every 5 minutes.
I did have a student ask me something and I didn't know the answer to it. There was another student on their phone and I said, hey, will you ask Siri this question? And the student, everybody looked at me and I was like, ask Siri. Since you already have your phone out, ask Siri. She's just slid it in her pocket. No, but no, pull it back out. Ask since we don't know the answer.
Right.
Well, I find it interesting as I'm looking around that I am the only one up here without a phone.
Stand outside.
That's not Charlie.
So
Your
yeah, I
phones have
definitely,
become watches too, you know, it's
yeah,
fine.
I definitely am more of a technology fan. One of the, I did a similar thing what Ricky did, and then when we talked, I stole his final thing with giving them to pre-program that response, and that changed the whole thing. Because about the first week it was, and then after that they didn't have to do it anymore because I guess the folks caught on. But the other thing that really worked out, and this was just like a wonderful happy accident, and it was just fantastic. I had a couple of, especially Monday, Wednesday, Friday class. I don't know what it's about, but there was one or two that they just had them out, and they just had them out. And we got to this part of the lesson, which was about the marshmallow test. I don't know if any of y'all have ever heard of this. It was where you give a little kid a marshmallow and make them wait 15 minutes. And if they don't eat it for 15 minutes, they get a second marshmallow. And it talks about like how the ones that learn that delayed gratification, how more successful they are, blah, 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 blah. So I get done that, and I say, okay, so how many of y'all would have eaten the marshmallow? And of course, they were like half and half. And of course, all the ones that have their phone out are like, oh no, I wouldn't have. I said, that's right, because your phone is your marshmallow. And,
Well, I think from the student standpoint, and this is what we're here for, but there's too much, there's a span of, some people are like Hitler and you can't have it, and some people are like, do whatever you want to. And so that's not fair to the student, but yet they gotta learn each instructor's classroom policies. But I hear students say that a lot, say, Mr. Green, you're a stickler on the phone, and I take so-and-so and they're not. I said, well, you're in this classroom and that's the.
Well, Charlie, you were talking about life. I'm on the other end of that. At the very beginning of the semester, I tell my students, we're all adults in here. We all have our cell phones. Unless I'm lecturing or we're taking a test, if you get a text message or you get a phone call, you go out on your own. Don't say anything to me. Just walk out in the hall, deal with it, and then if it's an emergency, come back in and say, hey, my daughter's sick at school. I could go pick her up. And that's how I've done it for the whole time I've taught here, and I really haven't had any issues. I have not had problems with students. I never see them texting, and I never see them doing anything.
Well, again, this one's a little different because they got work on
But
it.
that's very true. But what I do have is the other part, because they're all sitting in front of a computer. They are sometimes on a web page they're not supposed to be on. Well, we used to, now I hope we get it fixed, but we used to have this thing called land school. And I would tell, and I still tell a white lie here. I tell my students that I can monitor all of your screens. I want to let you know. And when it was working well, this is what happened. A student's in the back and she's literally chuckling out loud. They're supposed to all be working on something. And I'm looking at her, so I go and look, and she is emailing her girlfriend. So what I did was I put it up on the screen.
It's like taking up the note.
And there it is. And then before long, some of the students start laughing, some are, they're looking, and now fortunately there was nothing bad on her. I would have turned it off right away. But so I tell the students, I say, now look, get here early and take Facebook, check your email, do whatever you want ahead of time. I tell them, check your college email. I said, but once class starts, I want you to shut down any other tabs you have open. And if you don't, and I catch you, we're all going to be, and I've never had an issue with it. It's gone away. So I don't have the phone issue, but I used to, occasionally have that issue. But it's not a problem now. I believe that if we make our expectations very, very, very clear from the very first day of the class, and we're consistent, then no matter what that expectation is, the students are going to rise to the occasion. I've taught in a bunch of different community colleges, and when I taught in South Florida, I had to have the police come to a couple times because of the student body. And I've always said that our students here at Northwest are without a doubt the most polite as a whole. And I think we're so fortunate in having these students, because it wasn't when I taught Ohio, it wasn't that way. When I taught in Fort Lauderdale, it wasn't that way. And so I have been very, very pleased with the response my students give me when I set very clear expectations. No matter what it has to do with, not just.
I put on my syllabus, there are 3 things that I ask. Chronic tardies, no chronic tardies. Like, if you come in late one day and you've been on time for the last 2 months, I'm gonna assume there was a wreck on church or your dog wouldn't come back in or something. It's the everyday, late to class every day, okay? You need to get up early. No talking, and don't be scrolling on your phone. To me, there's a difference between waiting to find out about my grandmother, or my kids are in school and he doesn't feel well. There's a difference between that to me and
Or an extended conversation.
right. There's a difference between just scrolling, and like, oh, okay, is he okay? Do I need to come get him? And then putting it back.
The extended conversation we had, Charlie knows what I'm talking about, you do too. We had an accounting teacher several years ago who would take up the phone and continue the text conversation. You generally, after, leave me alone, I hate you, I don't want to talk to you anymore, I am blocking your number, usually those would go away. Or, yeah, she was, you know what I'm talking about.
I typed up what Mr. Shearer said about making the expectation clear from the beginning. I always tell my students I hate surprises, the bad kind, where, oh, she is one of those who goes off the loose end if I'm, texting or whatever. And I don't necessarily, I've changed a little bit over the last few years because we're in a different world. I'm addicted to mine too.
And when cell phones were new, like when I started teaching
Right.
in 2003, full-time, I was downstairs, and I had 35 kids in the room, and I'm teaching statistics, which you say statistics, and they freak out. And it's basic statistics, and all of a sudden somebody's phone rings, and I'm writing statistics, and you hear them, and the student answered, hello, and I just froze, and I turned around and said, breathe, Mr. Aaron, and I'm vibrating. And talk, hey, yes ma'am, okay, I said, what are you doing? And she said, well, it's my mom, and she hung up, and I said, I don't care who it is, unless it's Ed McMahon, and I get out. And, and I said, get out. And she said, you're kicking me out? And I said, yeah. And the front row people, breathe, Mr. Aaron. I was, my whole body. I said, you know what? No, sit down. Call your mama back. She started, I said, don't cry, call your mama back. She don't sit and say, mama. She said, mama, I just got kicked out of class because you called me during class. And I said, now get out.
No, you answered it.
So, but and that was 15 years ago, but still, these are important and they are helpful, but on most students, they ain't that important where they gotta have the phone. But I've never denied anyone, all they can do is say, Mr. Aaron, yes.
One thing when we were discussing this question that we wanted to also bring up was that there are so many more distractions out there that we gotta be careful not to miss because we're looking at the obvious ones. Like there really is something bad going on at home and that's what's keeping them from being able to focus, or they really do have a legitimate reason they can't get their book or they can't get on Canvas, or it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And so one of the things that kind of goes back to that original developing that rapport with them is that you can notice when they're distracted, not by their phone or not by a laptop or a tablet, but by something else. You can just tell when you look at them, something else is going on. And having, figuring out a way to deal with that. And one of the things I kind of do in my introductory dog and pony show is I tell them, I know these things are going to happen. And, I want you to share with me what you can so that I can help you, so that I can help you find your solution. I can get you to the right solution. I can do all those things. But also, another way to look at this is that this class time can be your freedom from that problem. Because while it's outside, it is outside, and this is something different. This is something that can take your mind off it, that you can focus on, that you can be successful in, that you can use to build you up, so that when you leave out of here and you go back to that crappy situation, you have got something that gives you strength. And I think that's really important that we don't forget that there are so many different kinds of distractions and so many opportunities for us to connect and engage with those students on a very real way that also encourages them to learn what we're trying to teach them.
That's what I was gonna say too. A lot of times cell phone abuse in my class is a symptom of a larger problem. I can't afford my textbook is the main one. And I have that more often than I used to. And I don't know what that says about it. And I will try to, after I've built a little rapport, I'll say, I'll recommend them to the foundation or whoever for help. But it's hard to do that, reconcile that when they've got a better phone than I do and their car's
Nicer
newer than
cars.
mine and,
And they
I
may
mean,
well have received a Pell Grant.
that's right. And
That's
so
frustrating.
it is, and I don't know what to do about that, except say, you have to grow up and learn to prioritize a little bit. But I can't say that right off the bat or they will all run in withdrawal. So, but I do give them advice about the textbook dilemma. I'll say, Mr. Green has turned me on to the Goodwill store over here on Highway 51. It's all books. Y'all may know about it. Many of the Northwest textbooks are in that Goodwill store. They've ended up in there. So if they need to buy a $12 lit book that may not be the exact edition I'm using right now, but if it's not, Middle English or Old English and I want them on the same translation I'm on, it's not an issue, Or if I help you find a website that has the same translation that I'm going to be testing from, the material from. So that's a new thing I've learned this year, is to go over, send them to Goodwill to pop like 40 short stories that we use for Comp 2 is over there. Mr. Green let me know for $3 or $4. So, that's better than Chegg or one of those other online places where they can lease or buy. So I've tried to reach out when I can, but that's what I always get. If they don't have, especially lit class, if they don't have their book, number one, they're embarrassed already. Number two, when we have an assignment that requires the book, they are gonna, immediately start doing something that makes them look cool. So that's part of the distraction is, like Rebecca says, a deeper problem. And I try not to go off the loose end, about that. But anybody, and that's in my syllabus, my course outline, if you have an issue where you need your phone on vibrate, please tell me. I'll accommodate
Well,
you.
speaking of textbooks, since many of you in here probably now have an ebook that you use, would anyone like to speak to how you incorporate the use of technology in the ebook in your classroom? Because for those of you who do have ebooks and have to use them, how do you go about managing the students' technology when they have to use their ebooks?
I don't do ebooks. And the reason I don't do ebooks, part of it has to do with cost, because we found out that they can pick up their medical dictionaries and a reasonably useful pharmacology book at Goodwill, sometimes for 50 cents or $1, instead of the $40 they'd have to pay somewhere else. The other reason I don't like ebooks is because most of those are subscription only. And the way our program is structured, we only have one book that we use for less than 2 semesters. Most of them we use for all 4 semesters. And the ebook subscriptions really aren't cost effective for that. Besides, they can go in, they can do, it's a lot easier for me to just write margin notes or underline or whatever, and then I can keep I can keep that textbook for 4 or 5 years or the rest of my career, really, because of the nature of the program.
Right.
Has there ever been any data or survey done from students to see if they like it better than a traditional book? Or?
As far as the
Uh-huh.
ebook, if there has been, I don't have that.
I see studies all the time, and I share them every single time. I see them on Facebook. We learn better from paper books.
Yes.
Amen.
I have to say, I do, there's part of the ebook that I do like, because we look, I teach history, so we look at the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, a lot of those are in there, and so I don't have to worry about saying, okay, make sure you bring your book this day, because the book is their resource, not mine. But there are times when we get to a point like, okay, we're ready to look at the Declaration. I'll have to say, oh, we're gonna have to wait because I didn't tell you to bring your book. I say, everybody has your phone, right? And they all have it. So I make them pull it out, or usually some of them already have it out, and I say, okay, go to it. And then I also tell them, you've got to put that Canvas app. And so with that, but we go through and we look. Most of the time when I've told them to do that, that's the first time they've looked in the ebook. But it's nice on my end, because it's right there, and someone's like, well, let me just look it up on the internet. I'm like, no.
And not all the courses have ebooks.
Right.
you know,
Right.
So for those that don't, it doesn't really apply.
Well, I think that's a good question. I mean, if you have an ebook assigned, the students pay for it.
They do, they don't have a choice.
But they're not allowed to pull an electronic device out and have their textbook open in class?
Well,
How's that work?
so in mine, if you were trying to follow along, because I don't teach out of the textbook, like you should have read the chapter before you come to class. So there's nothing for you to look at in the textbook until we get to documents, and then you can. However, a couple weeks ago, I noticed a student, she had her phone out the entire time, and I was like, I'll just talk to her afterwards about, let's stop, It dawned on me halfway through when I was lecturing, she's not texting, she's taking notes on her phone.
Right.
And so I didn't realize how many of them use their phone for other things, like, because they can put like Google Docs, and I think even Word can be accessed on there. And so then I was like, okay. Yeah,
So
so,
in that case.
yeah, and now granted, I'm still a newbie, but I've kind of figured out, you can tell when they are using their phone
On task.
and when they are not. And I've even kind of gotten to where if you're on your phone, as long as you're not causing a distraction to me, because in the end, you're only hurting yourself, because you're gonna fail the test. Now, I've had a student say on his phone and then say, could you go back over that?
Yeah, that's
No,
what
I can't,
Yep.
because you should pay attention. And
Exactly.
I've learned just to pick your battles when it comes to electronics.
So for mine, I've got 2 different systems. For the human growth and the child side, that book is just a resource. And they have online assignments that, in theory, make them read the book, loose theory there, and so forth. And I don't, and any few charts and things that I do need are always just incorporated in my PowerPoints and whatnot, and so forth. For the statistics course, there's a lot more in the book that I like to pull up, because there's like demonstrations that you can do and whatnot. But I just pull those up and put them on the screen, and there they are. And so, and for my thing, a lot of times I'm becoming more flexible, kind of like you on this. But originally I was like, look, if you want to bring a tablet, laptop, whatever, just tell me and so forth. And you can tell if they're working on their assignments or if they're not. But that phone's too small for you to be looking and reading anything anyway, so no. But I've started to sort of lean away from that because of all of that stuff, and trying to figure out a better way to sort of blend what is needed and what is not, and using something for an academic purpose versus, like you said, just scrolling for like, you're like, no, nobody's that interested in anything I have to say, particularly about statistics. I'm just sorry. You know, there's a
fine line between treating them like adults and realizing they're still immature children.
Right.
Good point.
And that may change from over the course of a class period.
So the last question I wanted to ask, and this is just kind of to echo the title, which I did not even announce, I'm sorry, engaging students to stay the course. So I just wanted to ask about engaging the students to stay the course, because ultimately we do want these students to stay in class and finish the class and graduate. So how do you encourage your students to stay the course and get through the class successfully?
I monitor their attendance and their tardiness very, very closely. As a matter of fact, in my Canvas grade book, the first thing that they see is attendance. And it's a lot of work for me to do that, but I put in there 1, 2, 3, and when they hit their third absence, if it's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, I send them an email and I say, you've got 3 absences. You realize you only allowed 6. Do you remember, you can come to my 10 o'clock class if you can't make my 9. You can come to my 11 if you can't, you know. So then I try to pigeonhole them, those people that have those, because, you know, my wife used to be in higher ed, and she would preach to the incoming freshmen that if you don't come to school, you're not gonna finish. So my goal is to try to get them to come to class, and so I monitor them very closely, and I do the tardies, and in their grade book, every time they're tardy, I enter as a comment, tardy, and then when they get their third tardy, I send them an email and say, you've got 3 tardies. Guess what? That's an absence, and that's the college policy. Now, I choose and pick who I actually mark absent, but I threaten them all, you know, and that's what I've done. And so my goal is to have them come to class, and whether they're in my 9 o'clock class, or my 10 o'clock class, or my 11, doesn't matter to me as long as they come to class whatever day they're supposed to be here. And then occasionally, depending on what we're doing, I'll have a good student they have so many personal problems. And if they're in a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, I will, on a case by case, I'll say, okay, you can come to my Tuesday class if you want, because obviously you cover a different amount of material. But my goal is to get them to attend class, because they're going to learn material and they're going to do well. And that's how I try to get them to stay the course, and, by monitoring their attendance.
When I heard that the topic was going to be retention, did y'all Google it like I did? Okay, so.
I use Bing.
Okay, Bing, excuse me. Bing or Google. Well, you probably came up with the same thing I did then, and because I know, you know, my students say, Miss Shaw, I can Google too, and I say, yes, I know, we're in the databases for this, you know, academic assignment. But anyway, I found where there was a study of 10 community colleges across the nation. And many of these same challenges that we've addressed showed up in this study, and for retention, and there's no rocket science here. Here are the findings: 1, 2, 3. Community college students face a dizzying array of demands outside of college that affect their success. Among the top 10 are personal issues such as balancing work and school. First, most frequently cited, that's the first one. Then paying expenses, having enough money, hence the textbook problem or the managing thereof of the funds. Meeting demands of family and friends. Health and disabilities. That's our students. That's a community college student. These are community colleges of California, all across the nation. And I'm seeing more and more. I noticed an article on LinkedIn. If y'all are in LinkedIn, you probably saw it, and I reposted it. More increasingly in the past 2 years, my students are caring for an elderly relative. They're the primary caretaker of that elderly relative. It used to be, oh, you know, you're pulling my leg out when I heard Not anymore, it's the reality of the situation. And I have pieced together the community college, my community college scenario usually goes something like this. My parents divorced, I moved in with my grandparent, they were wonderful, now my grandparent is sick and it's my turn to take care of my grandparent. So that's what I see, and I think that that is something that's gonna increase in our culture. I see that a lot. The other thing says students also report obstacles in areas directly related to their college experience, including online classes. They're too hard, the faculty is inaccessible. Those are the questions that related to that. And you know, my first response is, well, duh, don't take an online class, right? But 61%, when I go back and analyze this data, said I have to work this many hours in order to finance my little dream of finishing my degree. I don't know how to address that. I think that's something worth considering though, you know, and I think that we're doing all we can with starting mini classes for evening students. We're trying to give them an alternative and still allow them to work and finance their little dreams. Paying expenses, that's number 2. Family and friends, here's a difficulty dealing with the health of family and friends. 35% said that's a problem with that. The online classes, another one is lack of interaction with faculty, duh. The difficulty keeping up because of no regular class meetings. So, I don't know, it's a catch-22 there. And then parking on campus, I'm happy to say we have that here. That is not a problem here. So I think that we're doing really well on some of that. But that's an interesting little survey study that they did. And like I said, there's no rocket science here. And then the third one says, while students face challenges, they overwhelmingly report a positive community college experience, 95% of them.
I think you can address that faculty interaction pretty easily, even with the online courses.
Yeah.
I
don't think that's us.
foolishly trying
We're
to do
not in
statistics
this
online
study.
this semester. And one of the things I'm doing is every day I go in there and check, and if I see somebody that looks falling behind, send that little message, what can I do, how can I help you? Or I look at somebody, okay, you didn't do so well on this assignment, what's confusing you, what question can I answer? And I'm constantly, I'm nagging the crap out of them, is what I'm doing. But I think that can help. Now, some of them are responding, some of them are ignoring me, and that's fine too. But even in my regular classes, when I see somebody who's starting to fall behind or starting to struggle, I'll send out a message, hey, what's going on? What can I do? How can I help? Because a lot of times they end up dropping out of class, not because they couldn't have made it, but because they just didn't think anybody ever thought about it. Or they thought, well, my problem's too stupid, they're just going to tell me to go away or whatever. And by reaching out, I think we can kind of fix that and give them that opportunity. I even have a student who is staying in my stats course in class right now, even though it won't transfer because she's changed her mind where she's going. But she's staying in it anyway until, it looks like either she's going to make an A or not, and then we'll just start and talk about withdrawal then. But just to get the information, so that when she does take it at her university, she can get it. And it was like, we sat down and we talked about
do at least some of the work. But, and it's because Cindy and I, said, she don't look right, we need to find out what's going on. And a lot of it has to do with, going back to what I said before, way back in, listen to your students. Sometimes you have to listen with your eyes, but just listen, pay attention to what's going on, because they'll give off a cue of some kind if you're paying attention.
Well, I would say Northwest does a really good job, not to brag on us, but we have a student who attended another community college in Mississippi. And she said that she loves Northwest because at the other community college, like she went, but she said, you didn't get the same feeling. She said, every instructor that I've had at Northwest, they truly care, not just about me as like succeeding in their class, but me as the individual. She said, I feel cared for. Like if I have a problem, I can go. And she said, yeah, I didn't get that at the other community college that I was at. It was not in North Mississippi.
I have a question. Sure. Because I'm in a different world than y'all. I teach I'm in the workforce development. I do the adult ed. So my world is similar to y'all's. We have a huge retention problem. I have spent the last year researching this, y'all, with other colleges to find out why we can't, I can't get people to come back and even go take their test. And they score really high on the assessment. I know they can pass, but they just don't come back. And I almost stalk them, so I have to be careful with that. And so the question, if I have the ability to pull reports, and I was wondering with this, I really love this symposium. I think this is phenomenal that y'all are doing this because we all have different backgrounds. I would love to see some data on what the retention, now I've seen the data that comes out that we all see about the retention rate, but it's interesting to see benchmark, like I've been benchmarking with other colleges, and I hear the same thing that she hears from colleges not too far from here down Highway 55. They come to us and they'll say, oh my gosh, it's so different here with y'all. You act like you care. You may not, but you sure do a good job of acting. No, it's not that way at all. I said, I'm passionate about what I do because I don't have to do. Yeah, I go to acting school, they teach me. But no, it's like I tell them, and I'm like, I'm hearing what y'all are saying, and the one thing that I find that's helped us in our program, because we've had some issues, y'all. It's been like, we get this huge mass, and now we're taking 16-year-olds, which that's going to be the death of me. I don't think we should take them, but anyway, that's, since Dr. Hyman's not here, I can say that. But that to me is wrong. They should stay in school. We try to encourage them not to come, because it's hard. The GED program is hard. But the thing that I find that has helped me, and I've been doing this since 2015, we set the expectation on the front end. We explain to them, this is what's going to be expected of you, and this is what you're going to get from me. If this is not a Mother's Day out, it's not a daycare, which a lot of people use it for that. This is not a get away from the truancy officer because they're hunting me down because my kids aren't in school. We get a lot of that. I get a lot of, well, drug court orders me to be here. I really don't want to be here, but I have to be here. And so we just say, you know what? And I interview every single student that comes into my classroom. And there's some I turn away. I just simply say, you're not cut out for this program because you've got to put I only meet them 2 days a week, and they can't even make it 2 days a week. So how can they expect to get any traction if they just say, and then it's so funny, y'all were talking about the tardiness. Oh my gosh. I start now, and I learned this from another instructor at another school during our teachers conference. He locks his door at 8 o'clock when he starts class. And if you're late, you don't get in. You have to you miss class. And sometimes he said, I'll leave it unlocked till 8:05. But he said after that, he said, because it's disrespectful. He said it's just, and it takes away from the whole class. So I've started doing a little bit of that. And because and I tell them on the front end, just like y'all were talking about with the phones. That's a big deal with us. It's a big issue with our students because everybody, and when you see them doing this, they're not waiting on a phone call from their parents. They're texting probably with somebody in the room. I don't know. But exactly. And one of the things we do is we tell them, just like what y'all did, we tell them you can have your phones, they're going to have it. But place it face down. Don't put it face up because every time it's, whatever they're going to look. So we have them do that. So we kind of beat that battle. But we just have an issue with, like you said, it's the persistence of them staying with the program to finish so they can go ahead and get their high school diploma so they can enroll in Northwest. So we've had a good success record. But it's different now. Just in the 5 years that I've been there, I've seen a different type of student. and y'all were all talking about this, I heard it. And I'm not sure what to do about it. I mean, I've got all this research that I've done. You know, we have put together some different things that we've tried. We're now doing orientation every month. That's another big mistake. That's all I do is do in orientation. I don't have time to teach class, but hey, it's not my decision. I'm not the director. But I just think that's a problem because there's no, it just seems like there's no validity. They don't take it serious. Oh, I missed out. I'll come back next month. She'll take people in September. And so that's a problem. So I wish we could do like you do and do orientation. You do it in August, you do it in January. And I'm hoping that we change back to that. We used to do that. Because at that point when they come, I say, I'm sorry, you have to come back. Well, I can't, well, you didn't come, I've called you, I've texted you, we use Remind. And yes, ma'am, Miss Tippett, I'm gonna be there, I promise I'll be there. I get orientation, you don't show up. So guess what? There has to be something. So they don't take it seriously because it's free. They don't have to pay for anything other than their test. And we want to get them out so they can come here because a lot of them do, and we're happy about that. But it's a huge, and I was telling this, we were talking about this, one of the main things that we face is daycare, it's money to feed their family, and transportation. Those are the three big, when you were talking about that's the three big hurdles for us. If they can't meet those needs, they're not gonna complete, they're not gonna persist, they're not gonna
I
finish.
just told Dr. Hine, I just said, if we want to increase revenue, we need to open up Little Rangers and Little Rebels over in this plot by Casa Mexico. And he said that, I said, I mean, it'll
Truly.
open, make it 24 hours and it pretty much will stay full.
Are yours?
Look, I've even thought about starting one at Fred's.
That would work, that would work.
Somebody said that.
Are most of your students like here in DeSoto County? Coming from DeSoto County?
Well, we serve 11 counties, so, like, I'm in Marshall County, so you can imagine, it's a whole
Are
different.
you in
world.
Byhalia or?
I'm in Byhalia and Holly Springs, yeah. I go between those two locations.
Sometimes, we can have like students who like have missed because, like we only have one car and it's not working.
Transportation.
And I even thought, in Oxford, there's a city transit, that can go and like, even if maybe we had a DeSoto Center bus, there was like certain bus stops
All things come.
throughout
full circle.
DeSoto County because, sometimes like, we have students, like we had a student that was walking to school and,
We have something to do that.
yeah, there's walking and
But I think you guys said, some of the key things
have
that
to
you
way to
said,
get them here.
if they miss, like, and this is the way I do it personally, because we have the LACES system, that's what we use, it keeps up with all their attendance, it keeps up with their assessments, and anything that they pass their tests and all that. Well, I know because I'm in the classroom with them, but I can kind of look at, I'm a numbers person, I'm a math teacher, but I'm an Excel geek, and so I put together it's like a diagram that I do, it's like a thing that I work on every day. And I start looking at their trend, and when I start seeing that trend drop, I'm on the phone with them. But I can't call them because this is what I get. I'm sorry, the person you're trying to call.
It's not accepting calls.
Voicemail is full.
The voicemail is not been
But they
set
never
up.
set it up, right, they never set it up, or they're out of minutes. So guess what, I can do around that through Remind, I can just text them. I can say something like, $100 is waiting on you. And you will be surprised how many people will get back to you. And then a lot of times they won't. I can say if it was a counterfeit 100, I'd say if it was a real, I never said. And so when they get back to me, I say, look, I noticed you've missed 2 classes, and I just want to make sure everything's okay. Is there any reason, because you've missed quite a bit, because we only meet 2 days a week, and I cover a lot. I put 4 years of high school in about 6 weeks, is what I'm doing. And it's hard, it's very hard, because I do English, I do science, social studies, math, and reading and writing, so you can just imagine. So it's like, I text them and I say, because they'll say, oh, Miss Tippett, I didn't realize you knew I wasn't there. Well, of course I do, because guess what? I get a call from my director, you're not making your numbers. And I'm like, well, I'm telling that part. But, my attendance is down. And so but I think setting the expectation, having that face-to-face at the very beginning with the interview process that I do, and I just tell them, I'm going to tell you straight up, this class is not easy. And it's going to be tough if you're not good at reading. You're going to have a hard time in here. And the first thing they say, well, how far did you go in school? Well, I went to the 4th grade. Well, guess what? You probably will not make it here because you've never had math. Do you know your multiplication? This is my big thing in math. The first thing I asked them, how many people know their multiplication tables? Half of them do, half of them don't. And I said, guess what? It's going to take you longer to finish than it's going to take these people. Because if you can't do multiplication tables, you can't divide. And I explained it to them. And so it's really tough because I have such a different knowledge, I mean, they're all at a different level in this one room.
Like a one-room school teacher.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And I do all subjects, and it is very hard.
Sounds like my first year job in Northwest.
Well, you know,
I did.
but I will tell you, it's the most rewarding, I will
It
tell you,
is.
it's the most rewarding career, because I'm retired, and I came back after retirement from a 35-year career with a major corporation, and I said, this is where I should have been 40 years ago. But it's amazing to watch the transformation in these people's lives when they get the high school diploma, and they can go to college and do anything they want to do, and no one can tell them no. And Northwest has been the best next step for them. But the problem we have is that whole thing with, you know, how do we keep them? How do we get them through, to get them tested, and get them out of here? That's the hard part. And then I have some that have been in the program for 6 years.
Well, probably a lot of those students ended up in the situation they're in because they have no motivation. And-
That's part of it.
And now they still have no motivation,
Right.
and that's the problem.
And
Well,
one
we're
thing
also
John
paying
said
for
that-
this modern culture of multiple chances. They're so used to there always being another chance that they never feel that urgency, that desire, that immediate, I need to do this now because it may not be there tomorrow. And that's really probably a global culture, certainly a countrywide culture, but probably a
Y'all
global
said something I
culture.
thought was very important. You said something, I don't remember which one of y'all said it, but it's the fact that we try to tell them that they are important. They don't know that, y'all. They have never, I have so many students that will graduate, we do a graduation ceremony just like y'all do. And they will say to me, Ms. Stewart, you're the first person that's ever told me I was smart. And I go, you scored like in the 600s on your assessment. That's the highest you can go. So you are ready, you know, they do their assessment, they say, look, I'm scheduling you for a test next week. There's no reason you can go through this class. You need to go get your GED and be gone. And they look at me and they go, well, I always thought I was stupid. Well, who told you that? Well, my dad told me I'd never amount to anything. Well, your dad's stupid. I mean, I didn't say
Thank you.
I mean, you know,
Well, I didn't
I'm
get an
not-
alternative
I
school.
hope this thing's not on record, but I mean,
The alternative school decides that some people need an alternative to traditional education, and that's, you know, the GED was it. And so I can relate to, you know, what you're talking about, and yet, part of that is that just finally somebody saying, you know, you really can do this. It just, you just didn't get it addressed the way you needed to.
Exactly. But I think this is great that y'all are doing this, because it's good to hear that y'all are having the same, I mean, Keisha and I were both, you know, we're sitting here going, they have the same crap that we have. And I go, yeah.
Misery loves company.
But I mean, but it's good to know that, and I've learned a lot, I've got some good ideas, some things I'm gonna do, but I would like to know, my question was, is there any data that's available that we can see, what is the issue? Is there an issue with retention? Where is it happening? First year students, second year, I mean, are they dropping out after going for the first semester? I mean, where is it happening? See, I can identify that with mine, they usually drop out within that first 3 months, they drop out. I mean, it's because it's so hard, they can't do it for my stuff.
I don't know that there's any data that we have access to here that are readily
There should
available.
be.
There probably is data, but what, I do want to share a bit of data since you're a data person, and this will be very quick, but the point of this was retention, and I want to, this is a testament to the faculty that we have, not only the ones that are here in this room on the panel, but also our entire DeSoto Center faculty. Two things, you know, the students have to want to be here. They have to want it. Same with adult basic education. They have to want it. But we also have to have great faculty who keep them engaged and keep them on that path. And I want to share that last academic year at the DeSoto Center, our completion rate was 86.8% for students. Okay, and that's a testament to these faculty that are in here teaching those students. It's not exactly the same as retention, but they go hand in hand. So that's some data you might not see out there, but here at the DeSoto Center it was about almost 87% for the academic year. So
I think 2+2 helps us with retention because they can look at, you know, right across the hall and see
Every day.
every day and every morning when they come into the building.
That's what they're.
Everybody has to come in the front door, they have to pass that table with the 2+2s lined up, all the programs that are in place here that are available to them.
Yeah, and I think engaging the schools getting them while they're in high school to kind of, I mean, they say that has been one of the research that I did, they're saying that most of the community colleges that have a very high retention, very, you know, high success rate, it's when they do that, I forgot what they call it here, but when they take the students that are in high school and they start taking college courses. Yeah, dual enrollment, they say that has been the #1 thing that's kept them, I mean, they say it works. And so we're trying to do the same
We'll
thing. but I'm
soon know, we'll soon have some data. Lots of it.
And I'm trying to do the same thing with employers, because we have a lot
Right.
of huge employers in Byhalia and Marshall County that are coming, they're coming in droves,
They
big
are.
companies. And so
Mine
I'm
was
trying
on
to
the
get with them to
idea.
say, you know, if you'll support this person and pay for part of their test, I'll have a person that can go to work, they'll be trained and ready to go. And we're still working on that, because I mean, all I can do is pay for a couple of tests.
Do y'all have speakers come in the classroom?
Sometimes we do, yes. And I'm trying to, I need to get some people, I've talked to him, we need to get some people from here to come in, because that's a good motivator. We have people from the banks come in, we have people from the
I used to do
industry
that when I
come in.
taught the 16 to 21-year-old at-risk class once upon a time in Benton County, Ashland,
Well,
my
that's
first
what
year
I've
in
now
Northwest.
become. I'm now that 16 to 21 at-risk, I'm kidding, but.
Well,
it's
all
more or less
things
the same.
are circular. I had Steve Faris come one time before he was Steve Faris, international pro bono superstar, when he was just over there at the Faris firm. And first thing he did, talk about motivation, first thing he did was my 12 students in there in that class is lazy, come in and take his Rolex off and lay it up on top of my desk. And he said, they were all looking at it, and he would just talk about the power of silence. And finally, one of my kids said, Mr. Faris, is that a Rolex? And he said, it is. Do you want to see it? And he said, yeah. So he passed it around. He said, you like that Rolex? He said, I like money. I like my Rolex. I like money. I like the things money can buy. You know how you can get some? Get your GED, step one. And then he went over and started writing on the board and talked about getting a degree, you know, going on to college and working hard and that. For a short time, my kids, I had them reading on 3rd grade level in there. And for a time, even the 3rd grade level people were motivated to the hilt. You know, they were ready to raise the roof, man. And I just think it helps.
And Amazon came in, and, you know, because they're huge, and they came in, and I explained to them, I said, no, you understand that these people do not have, I said, but I really would love for them to hear what you have to say, because they need something to look forward to. And I want you to know that I had not.
And they chose, and they need to know that Amazon chose Marshall County.
Oh, there's a reason why they did it, that's a whole nother video.
Yeah. Like I said, my husband's on the idea, I know.
But here's the thing, so there's 9 people in this room, actually there's 13 people in the room, and I'm telling you, these ladies, and I told them, I wrote them a letter, and I wrote them an email, and I said, I don't know who y'all are, but I would hire y'all in a heartbeat for marketing, because they walked in and they had all these giveaways, and they said, hey, and the first thing she started out saying, she did kind of a Steve Reese thing, she said, how many of y'all want to make $18, $20 an hour? Does that sound pretty good to y'all? Y'all think y'all can live off of that? And they said, well, we don't have our high school. I said, we don't care, because we're going to help you. We're going to stay on top of you until you get your high school diploma, and we're going to hire you once you get your high school diploma. And you want to make $18 an hour? Let me show you how to do it. And they were like, I mean, everyone wants to, Miss Tippett, when can I test? You want to test Friday? And I mean, but they're still fired up, and that was 3 weeks ago.
That's great, that's great.
And so I'm trying to get the other companies, you know, there's a bunch of them, their Volvo's there, and they hire all the time, y'all. And
Is, what is it, Swell, is that what you call it, container, you know,
They're
the
all
water
ready.
bottle people.
I
Anti-water
think it
bottle.
goes back to the ones in it for them.
That's right.
So I mean, I just appreciate what y'all are doing, I think this is great, I think it's just,
Thanks
this,
for
I'm
coming.
glad it's number 1, and I'm glad there's gonna be many after this,
His brainchild, I guess.
so.
It's Northwest, and this is why I love Northwest. This is why I love Northwest, because what we do, I believe, is different. This is not happening everywhere, where our instructors are identifying, issues in the home and buying gas for the students. Ms. Duke going to campus to pick up a student who lives in the dorm, bringing them to school every day. Mrs. Allen, side by side with a student who has sickle cell, disease. Mrs. Shaw realizing that a student has a physical, disability and purchasing a rolling bag for her. These things are really happening on our campus, and there's so many stories like that. That is the type of thing that keeps our students on task and helps them to stay the course. And it's special, and I love it. And so thank you so very much for participating. I want to thank the panelists for what you've done and for sharing this information with everybody else. And I hope that at some point, every faculty member at Northwest, system-wide, will have participated as a panelist, for our faculty symposium. I hope to see this grow to where we meet Yeah, even this meeting.
I'll submit it
A
right.
bigger facility, you know, to house this, to where we're, you know, podcasting or whatever, because we've got a lot to
To
share.
my TED Talks.
Yeah, or
right.
TED
That's
Talks, or
right.
whatever the case might be. So, thank you very much, and, we'll end this. Ms. Walker?
That's it.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you for
Okay.
your time.